Don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Big Ten podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ben Stevens. It is Friday, December 11th, and I say that at the beginning because it is the final weekend of the Big Ten regular season, and we get you set for all of it. A full weekend preview of the 5 games still to be played. Of course, sadly, we had 2 cancellations this week, 2 great rivalry games. The game between Ohio State and Michigan will not be played due to COVID increases in the Michigan football program. And the Old Oaken Bucket between Indiana and Purdue will not be played as well due to COVID issues with those 2 programs. But still, 5 games. Final weekend of the Big Ten regular season before Big Ten Champions Week. And joining me to preview all of it, to give you our picks, our predictions, all of that good stuff is Kevin McGuire, a great member of this Locked On Podcast Network, the Locked On Big Ten community, and the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. Kevin, great to have you here. Looking forward to previewing weekend number 8 of Big Ten football with you.
Ben, it's always a pleasure to come on and talk some Big Ten football with you. There's nothing I enjoy more than talking Big Ten football with Big Ten Ben on the Locked On Big Ten podcast. It's the perfect way to really wrap up the week and get us set for, what I guess is the last weekend of Big Ten play. I still don't really know what's going to happen next weekend other than the Big Ten championship game. But hey, I'm still waiting for some details on that, Ben.
Kevin, you, James Franklin, other coaches around the conference, everybody waiting on the minute details of Big Ten Champions Week that we were promised before the season got underway in late October. But we have made it here to the middle part of December. You mentioned all the Big Tens. I'm wearing the Big Ten hat to round out the year. We are diving into the 5 games of the weekend. We will go in chronological order, starting with the early slate and ending with the afternoon slate on Saturday. 3 in that noon Eastern slot, 2 in that 3:30 p.m. mid-afternoon slot in the Big Ten Conference this weekend. And 2 rivalry games were canceled, but still some rivalry games to get us going throughout the Big Ten Conference slate this weekend. And it starts with the Battle of the Hat, the Land of Lincoln Trophy, the 114th meeting all time between Illinois and 14th ranked Northwestern. The Wildcats 14-point home favorites in Evanston. The over-under total, small, minimal, tiny, 40.5 total points in that game. Kevin McGuire, as you see it, the battle of the Illini and the Wildcats, who prevails on Saturday?
I got to go with Northwestern, right? I don't think this is a situation where Pat Fitzgerald is going to allow this team to look past their biggest rival in conference play before getting set to take on what should be a massive matchup with Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. Northwestern is just not geared that way. I mean, they're not going to have a look-ahead game situation, certainly with all the lines going to be on the line next week. You get a chance to take out Illinois. Northwestern's going to go all out for it. So I really like what Northwestern has done this year. First of all, Ben, I think, of all the teams that had a bounce back year, I thought Northwestern was probably going to have a bounce back. I didn't expect it to be quite this big of a bounce back, but hey, kudos to what they have done this season. Obviously, this has been a tough year for everybody, but Northwestern has found a way to prevail. And I think looking at this matchup with Illinois, I certainly feel like Northwestern should be a very comfortable pick here. But yeah, you mentioned the line's a little low. And I kind of think that the defense is going to be the story of this game. Northwestern's got a pretty good defense. So I'm going to ride with Northwestern here with the cover, and I'm going to take the under. I think this is a low-scoring affair, Ben.
It could be a battle in Evanston, Illinois. History would side with you as well. The Wildcats have won 5 straight in this series against the Illini. 7 of the last 8 meetings have gone the favor of the Wildcats. I need to see something here out of Northwestern, though, Kevin. By the way, the Big Ten West champions 2 of the last 3 years. With how bad 2019 was, Pat Fitzgerald has that consistency within his program. But right now, I need to see something out of Northwestern, specifically that offense. Coming off the upset in their most recent action against Michigan State 2 Saturdays ago, an idle week they did not expect this past Saturday due to the cancellation against Minnesota. I need to see that Northwestern offense start to put up some points, start to look efficient as they did early on in the season. They are graded 87th in the entire country offensively by PFF, 10th in scoring offense in the Big Ten Conference, and they have a negative efficiency rating right now. And Peyton Ramsey, a big reason for that, under 50% completion percentage in that upset loss to the Spartans. The defense, as you mentioned, Kevin, is still so good. 4th in the entire country in opponents' points per play, 7th in opponents' yards per play. That defense is very solid, but if there is a small but, in the upset loss to Michigan State, the Spartans ran for 195 yards. Illinois has the 2nd best rushing offense in the Big Ten Conference at about 210 rushing yards per game. So because of that, I don't think it's enough for Illinois to win outright. but I do think the Illini covered. I expect a low-scoring defensive game that we would see between Illinois and Northwestern. I think it's something like 21-17, 27-20. I do think the Illini cover that 14-point spread, but Northwestern wins outright and gets ready for their toughest test of the year in that Big Ten title game next Saturday against Ohio State. The second game of the Saturday slate in the Big Ten Conference is Minnesota visiting Nebraska. The Huskers a 10.5-point favorite. The over-under total, if Northwestern Illinois was 40.5, this one a little bit higher at 58.5 between the Huskers and the Gophers. Kevin, we haven't seen Minnesota play in what feels like forever. 2 weeks off due to COVID issues within the Gophers football program. What do you expect out of this game against Nebraska?
Sluggishness, a little bit of a disjointed offensive approach. And honestly, I haven't been real impressed with Minnesota when they have been on a regular schedule. So, I mean, this has been a really disappointing season, I think, for the Gophers. And I still kind of look at this as 2020 is a weird year for a lot of teams. So I'm wondering if that's the storyline here for Minnesota. But honestly, I expected a lot more out of them this year. And now they have to go to Lincoln, Nebraska, take on the Cornhuskers, who seem to have found a little bit of something to work with as the season has gone along. They're certainly playing a little bit more confident. So I think you get a chance to play for what the broken bit of chairs, whatever this trophy is.
Is there a trophy between these two?
I think that there is, isn't there?
Sure. Why not? Let's give a trophy to everybody. Let's have some fun with it.
Well, I think every game we've talked about today has had a trophy. Well, we've only talked about 2 games, but every game has had a trophy. And I know there's another one in the noon slot that's got a trophy too. We're going to talk about that one. But yeah, I think they play for some kind of trophy game. I could be wrong. But I do think that Nebraska playing at home, I think this is going to be a fun game. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be an enjoyable game for a lot of reasons, but I think it's one that favors Nebraska.
Yeah, it could be sloppy, but both of these teams need a positive to end out the year. As Kevin mentioned, Minnesota has been a dumpster fire this year. Not what we expected off the historic 2019 season and all of those high expectations heading into 2020. Nebraska needs a positive to end out the year. The first 2 years of the Scott Frost era have ended with negativity. They need something heading into the offseason to hang their hats on to say, all right, this guy, the head Husker, the prodigal son returned from Wood River, Nebraska, always a tongue twister, is leading us in the right direction. That is what Nebraska needs, and I think they get that on Saturday. But what I expect more than anything is a whole lot of points. Minnesota's defense, dead last in the Big Ten in scoring defense, allowing nearly 35 points per game. Nebraska is not much better, up at 8th, but still in the bottom half of the conference, allowing 32 points per game. It will be interesting to see what this Minnesota team does now after 2 weeks off. They no longer have Rashad Bateman as a part of their football program, but Minnesota's offense, even when things have been bad for the Gophers, has still been able to put up points. They average about 30 in their 4 Big Ten games this season. Nebraska, in their 2 wins, 30 points against Kevin's Nittany Lions, as I'm sure he knows, and 37 last week in their second win of the year against the Purdue Boilermakers. So I expect Nebraska to win, but I think Minnesota's offense does enough against that Husker defense to keep the game close enough to cover that point spread of 10.5. So Minnesota covers, and like Kevin, I kind of enjoy the over here because I think there's a lot of points scored with 2 defenses that really can't stop the ball that much and 2 offenses that if they get in a rhythm will be able to put up points on the scoreboard. So Minnesota covers and the over. Now, Kevin, it has been a very hectic week in the Big Ten Conference, as I'm sure you know. The game getting canceled. Will Ohio State make the Big Ten title? Will the ADs get rid of that minimum number required to play in the Big Ten championship game? So much drama, so many people angry, so many voices. I don't understand why we're all angry, though. We still have the best game of Saturday's slate still to be played, and that is Rutgers and Maryland, just as we all could have hoped for to end off the Big Ten football regular season. The Terps, a 7.5-point home favorite. The over-under total 58 points. Kevin, give the people some excitement heading into their Saturday between the Terps and the Scarlet Knights.
Well, this one is not a trophy game, but there absolutely should be some kind of trophy for this game, right? There has to be. The 2 newest members of the Big Ten still. This is going to be weird because obviously Maryland is another program that has not played a lot of games this year. They've had a couple cancellations along the way. And I feel like this is a good opportunity for Greg Schiano and Rutgers to go on the road and end the season, or at least the scheduled part of the season, on a high note. They're coming off a tough loss last week against Penn State. I feel like Rutgers should have given Penn State much more of a fight. I think we're going to see that from Rutgers this weekend on the road against Maryland. I think Rutgers has a nice little rebound, and they take it to Maryland. I think they go on the road and get out of Maryland with a win.
Ooh. That would be, as we call, a sprinkle on the money line as well there. Not only covering as the underdogs, but winning outright. If Rutgers could do that, and I think a lot of Big Ten fans would be happy seeing the Scarlet Knights get their third win in Big Ten competition. Maryland is a very interesting team at this juncture of the season. They had 2 weeks off due to COVID issues in their program. Then they came back and they lost to Indiana. Then they had another idle week they did not expect. So where are they standing right now? And really, when they've been on the field in their 4 games this year, it's been a tale of 2 teams against mediocre to bad defenses. And sorry, Kevin, I'm lumping Penn State in the mediocre defense
absolutely
component
fair.
of it.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. If you give me your blessing, then I will say below average defense to bad defense. Maryland has been good. That offense has been good. They put up 35 points and 45 points in their 2 wins. And Talia Tungavailoa has had 676 yards combined in those 2 efforts with 6 touchdowns. But against good defenses, as we saw in the opener against Northwestern, and then 2 weekends ago against Indiana, it was a very different Talia Tungavailoa who threw for 6 interceptions in those 2 games. And the Maryland offense only able to put up 3 points in the opener against the Cats, 11 points 2 weekends ago against the Hoosiers. But good news for Maryland fans here, Rutgers defense is below average, very much below average. 11th in scoring defense in the Big Ten, 10th in total defense in the Big Ten. Kevin, the past 2 weeks, or there's been 2 times this season, 2 of the last 3 weeks, I should say, I have picked Rutgers to cover. I've picked them on this very Locked On Big Ten podcast, and both times they have let me down. So fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you, Rutgers. No. What is that expression? Fool me once, shame on you, Rutgers. Fool me twice, shame on me. There will not be a fool me twice. Fool me 3 times, I should say. By that logic, I have to stick with Maryland. It's good when I got that expression out finally. Overall point being, I think Maryland wins and Maryland covers against a Rutgers team. I think it will be a fun game and there will be some points scored, but I think Maryland wins and covers. I would love to see a Rutgers win, though. It would be a lot of fun. I would not be mad, and I think a lot of Big Ten fans would be pulling for Greg Schiano as well.
I will say this: Rutgers, they may be one of the more entertaining 2 and 5 teams in the country. I'm not saying that sarcastically. Do feel like we have seen some fun out of Rutgers this year, and I think we're going to see more of that in this final game. Again, final scheduled game against Maryland, and I think it's a good opponent for them to be able to have some success doing that.
Possibly the most fun play in college football history that never counted in the game against Indiana. We have seen Johnny Langan be their Taysom Hill and bowl over people into the end zone. They have been doing some fun things offensively under Sean Gleason. And shout out to my guy, Noah Vedral, as I always say, the Wahoo, Nebraska native, the Nebraska transfer, who at times has looked very in control of that Rutgers offense. So now we move on to the afternoon slot on Saturday in the Big Ten Conference, and probably one of the best games of the day, the Heartland Trophy. Wisconsin visits 16th ranked Iowa. The Badgers, a 1.5 favorite. The total 41.5, but the Badgers, Wisconsin, 2-2, losers of 2 straight, favored on the road over an Iowa team that has won 5 straight games. What's good with that, Kevin?
I've been looking at this line all week, and I cannot figure it out because I've seen Wisconsin's offense the last couple games that they've played. They haven't done a whole lot. And Iowa is just going out and they're just taking care of business. They've had a couple challenges at times, but they've responded very well. And this Iowa team, if anything, Iowa should be a 1.5 point favorite as far as I'm concerned, because I feel much more confident about where Iowa is at this point of the season compared to where Wisconsin is. I get that maybe Wisconsin is due for one of those good performances, especially out of Graham Mertz, who really took the Big Ten by storm after 1 game of the season. But really since then, Wisconsin's hasn't been all that great since the Michigan game. So I'm looking at this matchup and I'm thinking Iowa's at home. Iowa's a very good program this year. I don't understand how they are a home underdog here. Maybe there's something that I'm just completely missing, but I've looked at this line all week. It hasn't moved, and I'm surprised by that. So I'm going with Iowa outright at home easily, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to run with that.
I think that's a very smart decision. The line really hasn't moved since it opened with Iowa being about a 2-point favorite, but then since early in the week, it's really leaned Wisconsin. Some reverse line movement, which leads you to think, what does Vegas know that I don't? Because you look at this Iowa Hawkeye team that has won 5 straight games, and really their ground game is kudos to that, averaging 193 yards per game rushing the ball in this 5-game winning streak. Spencer Petras is coming off his best performance of the 2020 Big Ten football season against Illinois last week. He was 18 of 28, 220 yards, 3 touchdowns, and especially led Iowa to that comeback early in the second half against the Illini. And don't get me wrong, Wisconsin's defense has been great. The offense hasn't been very good, at least in these 2 games that they have lost, but the defense has still been good. first in the entire country in scoring defense in opponents' points per game, averaging just about 12, allowing just about 12 to their opponent to score this year. Fourth in opponents' yards per game. They lead the Big Ten in pretty much every statistical category across the defensive side of the ball. But I have to say, Iowa's defense has also been very good, and I think at times doesn't get the credit it deserves because we talk about Wisconsin and Northwestern and Indiana so highly this year on the defensive side of the ball. But Iowa, sixth in the country in opponents' points per play. That is just one spot behind Wisconsin. Sixth in yards per play. That is just two spots behind Wisconsin. So I expect a classic Big Ten game where defense is king. Running the ball in time of possession will certainly matter. I think it is close, but I think Iowa is the better Big Ten team in a classic Big Ten game. Iowa wins outright. It could be 17-10, 17-14, but the Hawkeyes beat the Badgers in the Battle of the Heartland Trophy. And what better way to end out the Big Ten football regular season than to see just a classic slugfest between two great defenses and two great storied programs in the Big Ten West.
It's what Big Ten football is really all about. And I think it's going to be on full display here in this weekend's game between Iowa and Wisconsin. I'm, I guess, wondering, is this more of a historical trend? Because Wisconsin has had the upper hand in the series, so maybe that's playing into the line a little bit. I'm no expert here, so I'm just weighing in as much as I possibly can. That would be the suggestion I have for why this line has favored Wisconsin the way that it has. But again, I'm taking Iowa. I'm taking those points, and I am running to the bank with it right now.
Kevin, you are an expert in my eyes. You've been covering college football for like more than a decade, and you're especially an expert on the final game of the Big Ten weekend we are talking about because you are the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. And of course, we are talking about the land-grant trophy. Michigan State visits Penn State. The Nittany Lions, a 14.5-point home favorite to end out the year. The total is at 47. It is great to see the land-grant trophy back in the final weekend of the Big Ten regular season for the first time since 2016. To end out the year with a couple of trophy games, even if we didn't get the rivalries we expected in the game in the Old Oaken Bucket, still, this game matters. I'm excited to hear your opinion on it.
First of all, this is not a real rivalry. Just because.
Oh my goodness! Oh no! You just took everything I said and threw it back in my face.
No disrespect, Big Ten Ben, but having followed Penn State for as long as I have, Michigan State was a forced rivalry when they came into the Big Ten, and yeah, it has had some good moments. Don't get me wrong. I mean, this has been a fun series, but rivalry, it's not quite to the level of caliber where a rivalry I think should be. That said, I'm looking forward to this game. I think it's going to be a lot of fun because I think that Penn State has finally found a little bit of a rhythm late in the season, and it helps having the weaker part of the schedule come at the end. I'm not going to lie, but yeah, I think that there is something to be said about the way that this Penn State program has evolved throughout the season. They have never quit. Even when they were going through that 0-5 stretch, they always battled back, certainly in the second halves of games. So they were probably the best 0-5 team that I think you can find out there. With the exception of the Maryland game, I think every game has been relatively competitive. They've had a chance to win a bunch of those games. Not necessarily the Ohio State game, but Indiana game, Nebraska game, Iowa for a while. Although again, Iowa's a very good team too. So this has been a team that hasn't quit on the season, and that has certainly been the case the last couple of weeks where they've put together a couple of wins. And now they're coming into this game as a 14.5-point favorite. I mean, the way that this season started, that was going to be very difficult to see. And maybe that speaks more to the kind of season that Michigan State has been having. No disrespect to the Spartans, but it's been a tough year for Michigan State. And obviously coming off a real rough game last weekend. So I still feel as though Penn State is coming into this game as good as they've been playing all season long. The defense has finally put it together for 60 minutes. The offense has had better performances. They've had better starts, certainly the last couple of weeks. So that's encouraging. And I think it's all come together now. Penn State getting a chance to play what I would imagine is going to be one final home game. Just one quick note. This game has been moved up to a noon kickoff. So that's kind of breaking news. They moved into that noon slot that was vacated by Ohio State and Michigan. So just throwing that out there for you right now, too.
On the Locked On Big Ten podcast with Big Ten Ben and the host of Locked On Nittany Lions, Kevin McGuire. That's why we call you an expert. You know that stuff. Bring it to this podcast. That's why we love it.
Yep. But again, Penn State playing much more confidently these last couple of weeks, and that's why I kind of like them in this game. I'm not so sure about a 14.5-point spread, though. I'm not quite confident enough in Penn State's ability to cover that spread. I know they did last week against Rutgers, but yeah, I'm still kind of weary on that 14.5-point spread. I think this is going to be a little bit closer, but I do think that Penn State will get the win.
I love that you said this was not so much a natural born rivalry. I think the people that kind of decided to make the land grant trophy at some point were like, okay, what can we do here? And they're looking back and they're like, oh, these are the first two colleges in the United States to be given a land grant to make a university. Let's do that. And it was just, okay, we just made this rivalry out of thin air. But that is what we have in the land grant trophy between Michigan State and Penn State. Kevin, I said I was excited to see your analysis on this game because I really need to make up my mind here right on the spot. I'm going to be easily influenced by anything you have to say, but I do agree with you. I really like what I've seen out of Penn State in these most recent two games on this 2-game winning streak. They look at least like they have put something together. Kayvon Lee on the ground has been a big reason for that. 134 yards and 2 touchdowns against, or in a touchdown against Michigan, 95 last week against Rutgers. And the defense has stepped up as well in this 2-game winning streak. They have held both opponents to under 300 total yards of offense in both of those 2 wins for James Franklin and company. So I'm going to make up my mind on the spot. 14.5-point spread. I think Michigan State's defense is not bad, but they're giving up a lot of points, and they've been put into some unfortunate circumstances by that Michigan State offense, who we don't know who is starting at quarterback, whether it's Rocky Lombardi, Peyton Thorne. We're not exactly sure yet. I think Penn State's defense makes a couple of plays, maybe turning Michigan State over because they are apt to do that. That sets up the Nittany Lions offense to score with a smaller field. And because of that, I think they cover and they think they win. I knew they were going to win. I was going to pick Penn State, but I think now making up my mind on the spot here as we end out the Locked On Big Ten podcast, Penn State covers a big 14.5-point spread in the land grant trophy game against Michigan State. And Kevin McGuire bringing me the insight as always, but also keep me updated with the breaking news that this game now in that noon Eastern slot on Saturday.
Yeah, you heard it here first, right? So, yeah, again, when that Ohio State-Michigan game leaves that noon slot, somebody's got to slide in there. And what better way to fill that space than with the land grant trophy designed by a third grader, I'm convinced. It probably won a third grade design contest from one of the states of Pennsylvania or Michigan. But you know what? It's pretty cool that trophy has its own identity right now.
Yeah.
Every time this game is played, it's all the rage. Just talking about this trophy, sharing the images of the trophy. I'm sure you've seen the infamous photo of this trophy in front of that laser beam like yearbook photo. Yes, yeah. That is a timeless classic. And every time I start seeing that image pop up on my timeline, I know, oh, it's Penn State, Michigan State week. Here we go.
And Michigan State on their helmets this week, the emblem will not be the normal Spartan or even the Block S. It is the Gruff Spartan that everybody has been asking for. I learned about this through Michigan State Twitter. It is a big deal. Maybe now I'm going back on my thought of Michigan State not covering. Now I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to go with Penn State minus 14.5, the final weekend of the regular season in Big Ten football. We look ahead to next week in Big Ten Champions Week. That's coming up on Monday. But we got you set here for the Saturday slate, the final weekend of the Big Ten football regular season, and giving the predictions, the analysis, all the preview for it was Kevin McGuire, the host of Locked On Nittany Lions, a great member of this Locked On Big Ten podcast community. Kevin, always a pleasure, man. It was a lot of fun to end out the regular season with you by my side.
I'm glad we got to the end of a season, first of all, Ben. And it's always a pleasure to hop on and talk some Big Ten with you. And hopefully we get a chance to do it again pretty soon.
It has been disrupted along the way, but don't forget that, folks. We made it to the end of the 8-game sprint. That is something to hang your hat, even if it's not a Big Ten hat. That is something to hang your hat on.